Welcome to Hancock's VMware Half Hour. And welcome back. So, this evening's video, I'm going to show you how to reduce the size of a VMware vCenter server appliance the easy way. There are two ways to do this. One is not really technically supported. But basically create another disk, smaller size disk, and move the storage partition onto the other disk, obviously via SSH. Technically, it's not supported. And then there's this way. And you may ask, well, why do you actually want to reduce the size of your VMware vCenter server? And this actually basically applies to vCenter Server 7 or vCenter Server 8. The same procedure can be done in both. Now, if you've been watching these videos, you will know by now that we have gone through quite a number of VMware vCenter servers from 8.03, we'll call it GA, and then we've gone to A, B, C, and now we're on D. There is one drawback that I've sort of kind of spotted, which actually, again, applies to 7.0 or 8.0, and usually catches you out if you do a 7.0 to a 8.0 upgrade. Every time that the installer or the upgrader upgrades your VMware vCenter server, it increases the size of the storage. Now, you may have noticed when I've done a couple of RDU upgrades that I've sort of kind of struggled to maintain them at a tiny size. And it basically wants to do a small, and then I struggled and I had to do a small large. Well, this is because, and I've just noticed when I sort of kind of look back, if I sort of kind of if I look back at the disk sizes on the original 8.03, you can see quite clearly there that there's 586 gigabytes is used on that. If we have a little look on A, see what the settings are. Again, it's crept up to 700 gig now. Now, our environment's not changed. We've not added any more hosts. We've not created any more virtual machines. So why is the disk size increasing? And it does appear to be a fact function. Again, if we look here at the hard disk size, 400, that's gone down a bit. Let's have a little look at the disk sizes on this one. 700 gig again. And if we actually basically have a little look at the latest one, we're now at 2 terabytes. So going from 8.03, which was 500 gig, now our VMware vCenter server is occupying 2 terabytes of disk space, when it doesn't actually basically have 2 terabytes worth of data in it. So it's time really in this lab, because it was really actually restricting me on what I was actually doing in the lab. And I had a little look and thought, hang on a minute, is RDU actually basically growing the size of VMware vCenter server for not really any purpose? Now, if you were in a production environment and you had all the space under the sun on your LUNs, then you probably wouldn't really care about this. But, if you're in a smaller environment and space is important, then this video is for you. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I've already done because it takes a while, I've actually basically made a backup. So the backup size is 1.48 gigabyte. That took 11 minutes, November the 5th, 2024. And that actually reminds me, happy bonfire night. Not quite sure whether or not that you celebrate bonfire night over in the US. Happy election votings or whatever you're doing over there. But anyway, the 5th of November in the UK is celebrated as a bonfire night. If you look back in our history, you will know that it's all about the gunpowder plot, where a guy called Guy Fawkes who was born just up the road from me in Yorkshire. He decided that he was going to blow up the Houses of Parliament because he wasn't really very happy with our government at the time. I know really how he feels. I don't actually endorse any violence, however, or going out and blowing up the Houses of Parliament, just to get that on the record. But anyway, so Guy Fawkes basically decided that he was basically the gunpowder plot, and he was going to blow up the Houses of Parliament. Anyway, you know, he was found and he was thrown on a bonfire and he was burnt. So because of that, we celebrate Guy Fawkes and we celebrate Bonfire Night on the 5th of November. And we build a bonfire. We have a bonfire and we throw an effigy of Guy Fawkes, or the guy, on the bonfire, and we burn him. That's what they do in the rest of the UK. However, that today is still an illegal practice inside the city walls at the City of York. I'm not quite sure what would actually happen if you did actually burn an effigy of Guy Fawkes on a bonfire inside the city walls. I'm not quite sure whether or not you'd actually go to prison. But anyway, a little bit of historical trivia in a county and a city that I don't live very far from. The City of York in Yorkshire is where Guy Fawkes was born in, I don't know, 1506, 1606. I don't know, something like that. History's not my my best thing. Anyway, so back up. Now, the reason why we want to back up is because the method that we're actually going to use is we're going to pretend, let's pretend, that our current vCenter server is down and broken. And basically, we're just going to do a restore from a previous vCenter backup. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. I have done a video on this before. I think it was vCenter Server 7. There we go. In fact, actually, it was a how to restore vCenter Server backup to restore production vCenter Server 8 appliance. So I've already done this before. We're going to follow basically exactly the same procedure as that. But this is the reason we're doing this in the lab here is so that we can shrink that VMware vCenter server down. So mount the ISO in the drive, and we're going to click restore. So we're going to deploy vCenter server. And if you've actually basically followed these videos before, you will know that this is sort of kind of similar. So I'm going to go off and fetch our backup path and backup folder from the settings that we have here. So I'm just going to sort of kind of copy and paste these. And I'm going to need a username, and so that's our username. Just copied and pasted the password for our SFTP server, followed by next. Now it should connect, and it says file not found. Okay, so what I actually did there, I'm sure when I've actually used another protocol, I was able to browse and select. But anyway, so I've just actually opened up the backup, and I've actually basically copied that entire, we'll call that a link, including the underscore on the end. And then I've actually basically cut and pasted that, and it now actually basically turns around and tells us that that's the location, that's the backup timestamp, that's the host name, that's the deployment type. It's interesting, it's actually picked up there's 4 vCPUs, 21 gig of memory, and 2 terabytes of disk space. And I'm hoping really that it doesn't actually reproduce that. But we will see. We will see. So followed by next, I'm going to specify, I want to deploy this on the least loaded host, which is ESXi001. only because our hosts here really are very lightweight. So I'm going to say followed by next, followed by yes. It's going to validate. I'm going to call it VMware vCenter Server. I'm going to change the name slightly. So I'm going to paste that. And I'm just going to basically, I'm going to call it light. We're going to specify a root password. Followed by next. Now I get the option basically to say that I want a tiny deployment size, I want a storage size as default. So it's quite possible that that restore option is just actually basically making us aware of what our backup is. So I want a tiny, because the whole point of doing this is to shrink. Okay, let's have a little look at the data stores. So I'm going to select ESXi001 local, enable thin disk mode. It's already populated the settings for me. And I'm going to click finish. And that's basically going to start the deployment of a brand new VMware vCenter server 8.0D to our ESXi001 host. And once it's actually basically finished it, it's going to power it up, and then it's going to restore the database and everything from that backup. So what I'm going to do now, because I don't want it to get into a complete mess, is that I'm finished with this version now. So I'm actually just going to tell it to shut down that guest, and it's going to shut down that guest, and access to this VMware vCenter server is going to end when eventually it shuts down. And then we will hop on to ESXi001. We finish with that. I'll put that in the description, but this is exactly what we're doing here. So let's just log in with the root credentials, because hopefully eventually we will see that we've got a VMware vCenter Server 8.0 3D Lite, which is our shrunken disk version. And if I just basically click here, then I will wait for that to deploy. I'm hoping that the audio is actually better in this particular video. I've just notched up the mixing desk on the mic input one notch. I had some feedback from somebody on YouTube saying that the volume was very low, which surprises me, because I have my headphones normally up very, very high because I'm probably deaf. But anyway, so I've just notched the audio up a little bit. So if you're finding it too loud now, then come back to me and let me know. Anyway, so with that, I'm basically just going to disappear. I'm going to have some coffee. My cat Sylvie broke my other mug, so I've now got another mug. Not that you can see because it's completely invisible. There we go. I've got another mug now because Sylvie broke my mug the other day, deliberately on purpose to get me out of bed, down in the kitchen, and she gets a bit frustrated, and she knocked it off and broke it. Anyway, so I will come back shortly. And we're back. Stage 1 deployment of VMware vCenter Server 8.0D has been completed. So to proceed with stage 2 of the stage 2 of the deployment process, vCenter Server setup, click continue. So we're now going to click continue, and it's going to load step 2. So now it's actually going to do the restore from backup. So the path was correct, the username and the password are correct. We don't have an encryption password set, so I'm going to click next. So hopefully that's all going to be able to reach out to the SFPC server. If I just turn over my back and have a little look, I can have a little look at verbose mode. It's not doing anything now. Username's correct, the password's correct. Okay, so we've got a failure here. Well, that seems completely goofed. And the fact that we just took that backup before we turned it off, it's a current backup. But even if it's not liking the fact that this particular version that we deployed has only got 2 CPUs rather than 4, and it's only got 21 gig, these other error messages don't look right. But I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to actually turn off this VMware vCenter server, and I'm going to turn on. I'm going to change these values to 21 gig and 4 CPUs and see whether or not that those error messages disappear. But this doesn't seem to make any difference at all. Okay, let's see whether or not this is actually going to work. Again, like always, and I don't know what it is really in the last 12 months, I seem to be spending more of my time in the Broadcom portal knowledge base, diagnosing issues and errors. But anyway, this is what Hancock's VMware Half Hour is all about. You know, I encounter the errors, I fix the errors, I record them, I publish them, and then when you come across the same issues, then you can see how easy it is to resolve. Anyway, so let's see whether or not that this is going to proceed this time. We might have to log in again. Okay, and that's actually just going to turn around and tell me to finish. And once started, you will not be able to pause, stop, restore them from completing. Okay, so hopefully that's actually going to restore the data now in the background. When that started, okay, restore data transfer in progress. Okay, good. I did actually basically think for a moment there that we were going to get completely kiboshed on this and it was going to completely fail on its ass. But again, a little bit of Googling, and I actually basically found this Broadcom knowledge base article. Metadata and system validation failed. Message when attempting a file-based restore of vCenter server. And again, it would appear that the cause is because the partitions on the VCSA is not matching with the backup copy, causing the failure to restore. So you may remember that we were operating on a small, large, and that was our backup. And realistically, the way that this is sort of kind of working is at present, you can't actually restore to a different sized VMware vCenter server, which is certainly something different than what I've seen before, because this used to work with no issues. But it can quite simply be resolved. And I did actually basically just do a little bit of experimentation, and I did say that I shut down the appliance. I changed it to 21 gig and 4 CPUs, and I started up again, and it still failed, but those error messages went away, but I still got all the other crap that you saw, which then led me basically to this particular article. And all I've done is I've taken a backup of the JSON file that's there, which contains backup.metadata.json. And all I did basically was have a little look through this table here of tiny default against all these mount points for all these 17 disks and made sure that they were correct. So what I'll do, my mouse has just stopped working. Just one moment. Okay, so this is the original backup metadata on backup dash metadata copy that I copied before I started changing it. So you can see here, memory 21, the root partition is 48 gig, it's the same. The update manager partition was the same. The image builder partition was the same, but VTSDB was 550 gig, whereas the default is 10. Archive is 50, which is, according to the list, 50, that's the same. Swap one's the same, logs the same, DB is the same, net dumps the same, auto deploys the same, DB logs the same, but VTSDB blog is 5 and it's 15 gig. Here, and then the last one, which was seat, is 10 gig, and mine was 550. So all I've actually basically done is just basically made amendments to the backup JSON file, and they match. Now we've got another exception restored now. Oh dear, just get. So just as a little recap, because some of you have actually may notice that the T-shirt has changed because we're on a different day, and it's been many coffees since, because we discovered a problem in the lab. We were using core SFTP server, and for whatever reason of the core SFTP server, it would shit out and crash. So that was the reason for the failure of the backup being restored. Now, we have changed the SFTP server that we used in the previous video where we were doing a restore from backup for vCenter server. So we've had to scratch around to find another SFTP server. And to be honest, really, I never ever appreciated that Windows Server or Windows 11, Windows 10 can actually basically be an SSH server. So I actually thought that rather than use any third-party bunkum software, that we'll just go with the standard SSH server within Windows Server 2019, I think, or 2022. So the server's changed as well. We've moved the backups. We were actually storing the backups on a NAS anyway, to be honest with you. But the SFTP server was just actually basically pointing them to the NAS. But that doesn't actually basically detract or distract from the information that we discussed. The metadata and system validation failure is possibly a bug, because the partitions on the VCSA is not matching with the backup copy, causing the failure to resolve. So that had to be changed anyway. And then at the end, the reason for the restoration failing wasn't really anything to do with the restore. It was to do with the SFTP server, which was actually crapping out on us. So, but that did actually basically render the vCenter server completely unusable. So you wouldn't believe the number of times that we have tried to restore this because of the SFTP server. As I said, we were having issues with the first SFTP, so we moved it. We used core SFTP server. After configuring that and doing everything on that to get it to restore, it was still failing. So without further ado, here we go with our new SFTP server or SSH server based on Windows Server 2022. So the password's changed, the username's changed, the IP address is changed, but the backup is still exactly the same. So, you know, I'm not doing a basically smoke and mirrors. Here's one we made earlier, but that would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Although the whole principle of this video is to show you how we can reduce the size of our 2 terabyte VMware vCenter Server 8.03, which has become 2 terabyte in size because we've done probably 1, 2, 3, 4 technically upgrades on it. And every time we upgrade it, it gets larger. So I'm just going to click next, and I'm hoping that this is just going to start restoring with no hiccups at all. So shut down the original backup vCenter server before you proceed to avoid network conflicts. Okay, I'm happy with that. And we're going to click finish, and I'm going to click OK. And let's hopefully this is just going to start restoring the backup. If this doesn't actually restore via SFTP or via the SSH server, then I'm going to migrate it to an NFS data store. And I think we have used NFS in the past, so I'm sort of kind of rolling back now and wondering, were we using NFS backups and restore? But okay, that looks good because I've actually got to 17%, and this is the first time, and it's 25%. It's the first time I've actually basically get to 17% and 25%. So we might actually be with a bit of luck here, 34%, 44%. I'm trying to keep focused because there has been, as I said, I think this is the 3rd day of VMware Exploring Barcelona today. And there was some information and news that came out yesterday, which, to be honest, really was, I think, depressing at most. But we'll leave that depressing news. Well, I think it's depressing. We'll leave that depressing news for our VMware news at the end of the week, where I can discuss it then. But anyway, so this is started the post restore options, or it's almost finishing them. It's at 90%, 91%. So I just had a ping on my watch that turned around and told me that a DHL delivery is arriving from the US, Los Angeles. The interesting thing is that I haven't actually basically purchased anything from the US. Not that I remember. Okay, so it's now actually starting all the services. So it has actually done the restoration. So I'm going to bob off, and we'll speed this bit up in post. And hopefully we'll have a working VMware vCenter Server 8.03D light version. Okay, I did actually stop recording because I did think that it was going to fail. Me of little faith, as it seemed to stick at 71% for a very, very long time. So I stopped recording because I thought there's no point speeding it all up in post. If it's just going to sit there, and just as I'd done that, take my headphones off and open the windows in here to let a bit of air in because it's a bit warm. It finished. Stage 2 completed. So hopefully, if I click this link, looking good. Launch vSphere client. Now, of course, all the services have been starting up. So hopefully we're not going to get any error messages like no healthy upstream, web client initialization. That's all done. as part of the restoration. So we're just hoping that we can see our 3 hosts in the inventory and our virtual machines, and we'll then be able to inspect the disks. But you might have actually really seen, we'll wait for that, that all these disks here are the standard default disks, standard sizes that we would expect to see in a default tiny. Okay, it's quite normal really to be able to see that we've got high virtual machine usage, and quite high to see that we've got. So what we're keen really to have a little look at is our VMware vCenter Server 8.03D Lite, and look at the storage. So if we have a little look at, we've already seen this anyway, really. When we added one via ESXi001, we could see, so hard disks 586.85 gig, and if we just go back to our original, remember, and we have a little look at edit settings there, we can see it says 2 terabyte. So I think that's it, QED. I think we've definitely proved there that if you have been using definitely RDU, one of the disadvantages of using RDU is each time you're going to go through that upgrade cycle, and obviously we've been doing a few here in the lab, from .3 to A, from A to B to C to D. We've grown our VMware vCenter server to a massive 2 terabyte. If you're in an organization with lots of storage, you probably wouldn't really notice, but it is sort of in this environment with a small lab of 3 hosts and a handful of virtual machines, 2 terabyte does seem over the top. Anyway, I've got to disappear and I've got to say goodbye. Thanks very much for watching. Please come back. Don't forget to endorse if you're on Experts Exchange, or thumbs up and subscribe. My DHL wagon has just arrived and I've got to go downstairs to greet him. So thank you very much and goodbye. Come back and watch some more Hancock VMware Happy Hours in the future. Bye-bye.